This is Drilling Insight, where we talk about ideas and issues that affect the drilling and groundwater industries. I'm Jeremy Verduzco, host and editor of The Driller. With me is co-host and drilling expert Brock Yorty for the second part of our conversation with guest Tom Moffitt. Tom's experience spans water well, mining, and geothermal in both sales and product line management. In today's show, we jump right in with customer buy-in for heavy equipment, then discuss the supply chain and other topics. Thanks for tuning in. So once you have this product and you're ready to ramp up wider sales, maybe get beyond your first couple of sites and it's testing well and whatnot. So once you're at that point, what's the hardest aspect of buy-in for those customers outside of that first kind of primary group?
Today, and in the past, buying a new rig always comes down to rig pricing. What's the monthly payment? How much you going to give me for my trade-in? And then the drillers are going to ask, why should I buy it? What's it going to do for me better than my existing piece of equipment? And that's going to vary from customer to customer. You look at if somebody's running a 20-year-old rig, you got to ask them, well, what are you spending on maintenance a month? Do you shut it down in the winter and do a total rebuild, or how much are you spending on your rebuild cost yearly? And how much downtime do you have? Because with a new machine, they come with good warranties, and you should always buy the extended diesel engine warranties. With today's engines, they're just so complex, and one service call can be covered by the extended warranty. But having a rig that's up and running, that looks nice and pretty, your employees are going to like that. The public sees you have a new piece of equipment. It promotes your business rather than running a 20-year-old piece of equipment that's you're having to maybe run it at night to get around the scales or get around the police or something like that. Which you don't want to
Not
be doing.
that anyone in our audience does that. No, I don't think that happens.
So, to piggyback off of the, prototype to final product, even tried and true products that have had a long legacy in the industry with, necessary changes, again, east to west of the Mississippi, north to south, how do you deal with customizations that are required by a drilling company? It's not, we buy an F-150, we don't take it back to the shop and grab the cutting torch and take the bumpers off it and decide to change how the doors open. But let's face it, we see a lot of customization happening in the field.
Yeah, no, it was, I used to order all the inventory for the US, and it was always a challenge. Do I put a sand reel on? Do I put a mud pump on? And as you said, various regions, want an auxiliary winch, don't want a sand reel, want mud, want different size air. It was always a challenge in doing that. I think it basically comes back to, trying to understand what's the customer going to do. Can you, from a factory side, can we pre-design in, some of those things to make it easier to either add them in the field or add them at the factory after a rig's been built? So, whether it's, running a set of hydraulic hoses to add the winch, or, to add the sand reel, that they're already there. It got to a point where we pre-plumbed all of our rigs towards the end with mud, unless unless you were custom ordering a machine, then we could do it at the time, no, you don't want mud. I would still tell people that, you ought to put the mud piping on, just because someday when you go to sell that rig, it's easier to sell with mud piping, and the cost up front is
Absolutely.
way less than the cost of adding some of these options down the road. So we would try to look at, like I said, how do we build the rig to make it configurable for the options. Now, as you guys mentioned, you do get people that, I want, highly custom options, and we would, put that, on our local stores or dealers to work with the customer. I'll say at times you couldn't agree to everything. Just, from an engineering point of view, it just didn't make, or from a safety point of view, there were things that we didn't want to do as a manufacturer. And we'd say, after you take ownership, you can do what you want with it, but we don't recommend it. And especially when you get into, structural integrity issues and safety, we would highly discourage those changes.
Yeah. And I can imagine making it more of a switchblade type platform where you can have this, or you can add this or subtract this. Probably a huge advantage in what Brock's talking about, this regionalism and the regional demands of the industry.
Yes.
Yeah. So, but that, as a manufacturer, that comes with a lot of inputs. If you need to add this or that, it's a lot of parts. So that's a supply chain. How does the supply chain look to you right now? And is that a viable way to continue building right now? We keep reading about issues. Is having that many inputs a challenge, or too much of a challenge?
Yeah, it's a challenge. I remember once, years and years ago, when one of the, somebody from the accounting department came up and said, you need to build one standard configuration. I think it was a T4W or something or other, or maybe it was a T3, but, and it's like, as Brock just pointed out, East and West are different. The Midwest is different. And it was like, do you want to cut our sales in half? You can't do that. And at that time, the rigs weren't as designed to be as flexible to, reconfigure them. And so, I think, it's tough. With the supply chain issues today and the trucks, trucks are probably the biggest issue. When I was at NGWA, I talked to a couple of the manufacturers, and you'd hear stories where, we ordered 24 trucks and the manufacturer told us we're getting 12. And if we don't like it, to take our business elsewhere.
Yeah, I've heard 18-month lead times, and
Yes.
like long.
Yeah, and unfortunately, the industry is small, and to a major truck manufacturer, Walmart can come in and order 200 trucks or something or other, and as a whole industry, we're probably only going to order, of that class of machine, maybe 60 trucks or something among 4 or 5 different manufacturers. So it's not a good way, or it's really tough right now as a manufacturer. All of them are supply chain constrained. It's almost like you need to build your own truck, but I'm not suggesting that. Well, you can't make it smaller and lighter and then carry more drill rod. You're kind of defeating the purpose. And then the other thing is, why can't a rig be $500,000 instead of $1 million? And in today's market, a lot of people say, just go back and build the model that you built 20 years ago, and you can't do that because of the engine changes. And technology has changed. You can't get some of those components from years ago.
Yeah.
And so you gotta build with what the current technology is. And most of the if you look at a load sense hydraulic system, electric over hydraulics and things, they're much better off than where we started. Straight hydraulics or air over hydraulics, and yes, there are quirks and differences, but really that's where you want to be. Is running those type of rigs. They're faster. They do operate differently, but so it's challenges, and it's just not. I don't know. It'd be nice if you could say, let's build that rig from 20 years ago, but I don't know where you're going to get the parts to do that. And is it going to match up with today's engines?
So we got a lot of different size rig manufacturers out there. And we have rig manufacturers that are owned by, big companies that build heavy equipment, build into other construction industries. And they are driven the same as many big industries with safety standards. How do we incorporate the safety standards that we need into an industry that, as I already just talked about, weight, price, and change, and 100% have just decided to start wearing hard hats and steel-toed boots 5 years ago?
And I've traveled around the world, as I know you have, Brock, and I've been to places where drillers are drilling barefoot, and so hard hats and shoes aren't even there. But I think I think it's trying to get people accepting of some of the technology that's out there, the rod handling. People get afraid of it, that if I push the button, it doesn't work, and trying to simplify it so that it does work every time, because really rod handling is it's scary. I mean, you're picking up a drill rod, and especially if you're using a Murphy plug or something like that, you hit the rod, and people have been seriously injured and killed from that. So it's trying to move the industry forward. That's why we would look to partner with certain drillers and have them be kind of a showcase for us, that we could bring in customers to watch them drill and see how the new product worked, and the technology, and to get them to accept it. As far as on delivery of a new machine, it starts with training the operators, how to run the machine safely during the startup. Every rig goes out with a training manual. There's placards on the side with don't do this and don't do that. Do people look at those? Not always. I mean,
And they even have drawings too, like don't put your hand here. Like
yes, yeah. Don't put up a tower under power lines and things like that. And still, we constantly read about that happening. Look up before you do that. And there are sensors and things that could be put on the rig that would warn you that there are power lines. It all costs money, but it can be done. But people have to be willing to pay for it. So, as a manufacturer, you're constantly looking at, how do we keep it cost effective with, that somebody's going to buy, but trying to build as safe a product as possible. But it's a challenge. As I said, I've with the weight issue, Brock, I've been out and seen people had, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 extra drill rod loaded on the drill pipe tub, and then they've had a mud pit hanging down on the back of the drill rig, and it's loaded with bags of mud, and which is just terrible, because that weight's cantilevered over the back, and it's adding a tremendous amount of weight, and so it adds a lot of challenges. And when I can tell you, from an engineering point of view, we don't look at it when we're doing our axle ratios and weight ratios. Well, geez, what if somebody adds a mud pit on the back? If we supply one, then we calculate it in. But if somebody does it after the fact and then loads it up with all their tooling and and even things as hammer holders, we would try to design in a plate where one could be put in. But if you start adding 3, 4, 5, or add in a casing hammer, I mean, that just totally changes the way the rig was it designed to do that or not. And it's best for the drillers to talk to the manufacturer if they plan to do some of these things with it. But we try to build them as safe as we can, but there's always somebody that's going to do something you didn't expect.
Yeah. So we've covered a lot of kind of changes to the machinery for either safety or production, but looking out on the horizon, like what do you think drill rigs 20 years from now will look like versus the ones in wide use today?
Wow, that's a great question, Jeremy. I think, personally, I think it's a real exciting time. I think that we're going to see a lot of changes coming. As I mentioned before, I think, rig footprints probably need to be pushed a little bit smaller to make them lighter, more maneuverable. You need to have, as I mentioned, a flexible design so that the rigs can take on, more tasks of doing water well, geothermal, cathodic protection, mineral exploration. And then I think, there's a huge potential in the geothermal market coming up. There's just a huge need for drillers. The market's, set to explode, and most water well drillers aren't addressing that, and not even a lot of the manufacturers are addressing it. So I think there's great opportunity there to optimize the rigs. If you look at mining equipment today, they're moving, especially underground, to battery powered equipment. And over the next 20 years, I think you'll see that coming into water well. But technologically, we're not there to go out and run a drill probably for more, especially an air rotary drill, for more than a few minutes on a battery pack. It's just not there. Also on the mining side, they have tele-remote drilling where you can have an operator that sits in a cab, either on site or 1,000 miles away, and that they can run multiple drill rigs. I'm not sure how that would work with water well, because we have casing that we got to set, we've got grouting, you got to be looking at how's the how much water it's producing, and in blast hole drilling, you're just trying to get a hole in the ground to maybe I don't know, 20 to 100 foot in depth to set explosives. So you're not drilling to an unknown depth like we are in water well. From a technology point of view, there's all sorts of development going on in the oil and gas sector, and a lot of times that filters down to the water well side. If you look at the PDC bits and things like that, that all started in on the oil and gas side. And there's some real interesting companies out there. There's a company called Quaise Energy that's developing millimeter wave drilling technology. They're out of MIT. There's a company called GA Drilling that's doing plasma bit drilling. Petra's doing thermal spallation.
I've read about the plasma,
Hyper Sciences uses a hypercore engine to shoot projectiles at extreme speeds to break up the rock. And it's hard to say which one or if any of these will be commercially viable, and then if they are, can they be downsized to become a cost-effective method for drilling water well and geothermal. but I certainly think it's an exciting time. Over the next 20 years, I think there'll be a tremendous amount of change.
Well, with that, I think we'll wrap up today's episode. So thanks again, Tom. I want to revisit something you said about customers requesting, why don't you make the rig you made 20 years ago? I suspect a lot of that conversation is, why don't you make the rig at the cost I paid 20 years ago? That wouldn't surprise me at all. But the thing is, though, even if say they paid $500,000 20 years ago, making that same exact rig now would not cost, it wouldn't cost them $500,000 today.
Right.
Just talking about inflation. So.
Right. And I mean, you just look at the price of a truck, and they've probably more than doubled in price. And as you said, inflation and other items, that everything is more expensive today.
Yeah. What are your thoughts, Brock?
This is a continuous conversation, and the great thing about bringing Tom on is, as I've interacted with him throughout the industry and known, and we have worked in different companies and been competitors, but friends, he's always had a great insight and thought leadership in what we could do in our industry as drill rig manufacturers and drillers, and looking at the future and innovation without having this idea of, look, it's my piece of equipment that's going to lead the way, understanding that when there's only 65 new rigs built, we all have to be able to effectively build something that our customers want with the customization and get it into the field. And that's something that Tom has championed well. So I thank you for that, Tom.
Thank you, Brock.
Okay, so Tom, where can the audience find out more about you?
Well, I guess, my email is tomkmoffitt@gmail.com, and that's Moffitt is Moffitt, or on LinkedIn at Tom K. Moffitt. If anybody has any questions, reach out to me. I'm currently doing some consulting work for a few companies, and welcome to help anybody. Like I said, I think it's an exciting time in the industry, and there's a lot of change coming, and excited to see what moves forward here.
Yeah. Well, thank you again for sharing your insights today. So you can find fresh episodes of our show on our website or on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Just search Drilling Insight and hit the subscribe button, folks. And don't forget to visit thedriller.com for the latest industry news and views. And also follow us on the usual social media channels. So until next time, folks, this is Drilling Insight.